10 years feels like nothing when you're in your 20s, just a decade of life, right? But that single decade is worth $847,000 in retirement wealth that you can never, ever get back. I'm late by 5 minutes. Most people think starting to invest at 22 versus 32 is just a minor difference in timing. What they don't realize is that this decade gap is the difference between financial freedom and working until you're 70. Let me introduce you to two people, Emma, who starts investing at 22, and Josh, who starts at 32. They both invest the exact same amount every month for the exact same number of years, but their outcomes are completely different. Emma graduates college at 22, gets her first job making $45,000, and immediately starts investing $300 per month. Her friends think she's crazy for throwing away money when she's young instead of enjoying her 20s. Josh, on the other hand, spends his 20s living life, traveling, going out, buying things, building experiences. He tells himself he'll start investing at 32 once he's more settled and financially stable.
Here's what happens in Emma's first year. She invests $3,600 total, and it grows to about $3,960 with a 10% average return. That $360 gain feels like nothing, it's barely noticeable, which is why most people quit in year 1.
By year 5, Emma has invested $18,000 total, and her account is worth about $23,300. She's made $5,300 in gains, but it still doesn't feel life-changing yet. This is where most people lose faith.
Meanwhile, Josh is 27 years old, still not investing, and has exactly $0 working for him in the market. But he has memories of trips and experiences, which he values more than boring numbers in an account.
By age 32, Emma has been investing for 10 years. She's put in $36,000 total, and her account is worth $61,400. She's made $25,400 in gains, and for the first time, the compounding is starting to feel real.
This is the exact moment Josh decides to start investing. He's 32, finally ready, and begins contributing $300 per month. But here's what he doesn't realize. He's already lost the most powerful investing years of his entire life.
Let's fast forward to age 42. Emma has been investing for 20 years. Josh has been investing for 10 years. Emma has invested $72,000 total, and her account, she's made $156,600 in gains.
Josh has invested $36,000 total, and his account is worth $61,400. He's made $25,400 in gains. Even though Emma invested twice as long, notice that her gains are 6 times larger. That's compound interest accelerating. Now let's jump to age 52. This is where the decade gap starts to look absolutely devastating. Emma's account is worth $628,300, while Josh's account is worth $228,600, a $400,000 difference. And remember, they both invested the exact same $300 per month, the exact same total amount of money. The only difference is that Emma started 10 years earlier, and that decade is worth nearly $500,000.
By age 62, when both are thinking about retirement, Emma's account has grown to $1,397,000. Josh's account is at $550,000, which sounds like a lot until you realize Emma has $847,009 more. Here's the part that breaks people. Emma and Josh both invested $108,000 of their own money over 30 years. But Emma retires with $1.4 million while Josh retires with $550K. Same effort, same sacrifice, wildly different outcomes.
So what's actually happening during that first decade that makes it so valuable? It's not just compound interest, it's compound interest having time to compound on itself, which creates exponential growth.
Every dollar Emma invested at 22 had 40 years to grow before retirement at 62. Every dollar Josh invested at 32 only had 30 years, and that 10-year difference is everything.
Let me show you the math on a single $300 investment to make this crystal clear. Emma's first $300 at age 22, growing at 10% annually for 40 years, becomes $13,600.
Josh's first $300 at age 32, growing at 10% annually for 30 years, becomes $5,240. The same $300 invested just 10 years later is worth $8,360 less. That's the decade gap on a single contribution. Now multiply that across 120 monthly contributions in that first decade, and you see where the $847,000 gap comes from. It's not one big decision, it's 120 small decisions compounding across 4 decades.
Here's what most people get wrong. They think they can catch up by investing more later. Josh would need to invest $780 per month from age 32 to match Emma's outcome. That's 2.6 times more money. And here's the brutal reality. Most people who wait until 32 don't suddenly have an extra $780 per month lying around. By then, they have car payments, higher rent, more lifestyle expenses, so catching up becomes mathematically impossible.
Let's talk about what Emma sacrificed during those first 10 years to invest $300 monthly. She drove an older car, lived with roommates longer, cooked at home more, and said no to expensive trips. Her friends thought she was missing out on her youth, being too serious, not living in the moment. But at 62, Emma is financially free while her friends are still working because they can't afford to retire.
Josh, meanwhile, spent his 20s creating experiences and memories that he still values today. But at 62, he's working part-time because $550K isn't enough to maintain his lifestyle for 30 years of retirement. Now here's the psychological trap that keeps people from starting at 22. The money feels invisible and meaningless. Watching $3,600 turn into $3,960 in year 1 doesn't trigger any emotional reward, it just feels like nothing. But buying a $3,600 vacation to Europe triggers massive dopamine. You get photos, stories, experiences, social validation. Your brain is wired to choose immediate visible rewards over delayed invisible compounding every single time.
This is why the vast majority of 22-year-olds choose to be Josh instead of Emma. The sacrifice is visible and painful now, while the reward is invisible and abstract for decades.
Let me show you another angle on the decade gap, retirement age. Emma can retire at 57 with over $1 million. Josh has to work until 65 to reach that same number.
That's 8 extra years of working, 8 years of commuting, 8 years of answering to a boss. The decade gap at the beginning creates an 8-year freedom gap at the end, time you can never buy back.
Now let's address the biggest objection. I didn't know about investing at 22, so this doesn't apply to me. If you're 25, you still have a 7-year gap advantage. If you're 28, you have a 4-year advantage.
The decade gap principle works at any age. Starting today is always better than starting in 10 years. The question isn't whether you're already behind, it's whether you're going to fall further behind or start closing the gap now. Here's what happens if you're 32 right now and feeling like you've already lost. You can still build $550K by 62 wall, which is life-changing wealth, or you can wait until 42 and have even less. The worst financial decision you can make is thinking I'm too late, so why bother starting at all? That mentality turns a 10-year gap into a 20-year gap, then a 30-year gap, until you're 60 with nothing. Let me show you what the decade gap looks like at different starting ages to make this personal. Starting at 25 versus 35, investing $300 a month until 62 creates a $530,000 difference. Starting at 30 versus 40 creates a $340,000 difference, still devastating, but less than the 22 versus 32 gap. The earlier the decade you delay, the more expensive that delay becomes. Your 20s are the most valuable. Now let's talk about the second-order effects of the decade gap that nobody discusses. Emma's $1.4 million generates about $56,000 per year in safe retirement income at a 4% withdrawal rate. Josh's $550K only generates $22K per year. That leaves a $34K annual gap over 30 years. This creates a 1M plus lifestyle difference. We need to act now.
Emma's lifestyle is generous and fulfilling. I travel, help my family, and donate to charity. Josh's lifestyle is cautious and anxious. I budget, but worry about healthcare and savings.
Here's another brutal truth. The decade gap affects your entire family tree, not just you. Emma can leave wealth to her children, breaking the cycle of financial struggle. Josh's kids start from scratch. Let's talk about what actually stops people from being Emma instead of Josh. It's not lack of money, it's the belief that $300 per month won't make a difference anyway.
At 22, $300 feels like a huge amount. Yeah, with no reward. But that decision leads to $1.4 million by 62, which is too late. Wow, that's a huge difference. Start saving now.
The second thing that stops people is lifestyle comparison and social pressure. When all your friends are going out and you're staying in to invest, you feel like you're missing out on youth. To achieve future freedom, invest your time wisely. Your mindset determines your success. Reframe your mindset today.
Step 1. Open a Roth IRA or 401k today. Not next month. Delaying costs you compound growth. Open an account now and start building your future. Step 2. Set up automatic monthly transfers of whatever you can afford, even if it's just $100 to start. The specific amount matters less than the habit and the time. You can increase it later as your income grows.
Invest in VTI or VO index fund. Never look during crashes. This keeps you invested for long-term growth. Stay the course and trust the process. Step 4. Increase your contribution by $100 every time you get a raise or promotion. This is how you go from $300 a month at 22 to that $300 the lifestyle impact. Stop mourning lost decades. Maximize the decades you have left. Regret doesn't earn returns. Let's move forward with focus. Second, increase your contribution rate to compensate for lost time. If you can do $500 a month instead of $300, do it. You can't get the time back, but you can make up some ground with higher contributions. Third, focus on the decade gap advantage you still have. 32 versus 42 is still worth $300 K plus difference. You're behind Emma, but you're ahead of the version of yourself who waits another 10 years. Here's a scenario nobody talks about. What if Emma stops investing at 32 but leaves the money alone? She invested $36,000 total over 10 years, then contributed nothing for the next 30 years.
At age 62, Emma's account would still be worth $1,068,000, more than Josh's $550K despite stopping contributions. This proves the decade gap isn't about how much you invest, it's about when you start and the time you give it. Josh invested $108,000 over 30 years and ended with less than Emma, who invested $36,000 over 10 years. That's the raw power of time in the market. It beats both timing the market and amount invested. Let's talk about the emotional journey of being Emma versus being Josh. Emma spends her 20s feeling behind her peers, watching them enjoy life while she sacrifices. But by her late 30s, the compounding becomes visible and she starts feeling ahead for the first time. By her 50s, she's financially untouchable, while her friends are panicking about retirement.
Josh spends his 20s feeling great, living in the moment, creating memories, enjoying youth. But by his late 40s, the financial anxiety sets in as he realizes retirement is approaching and he's behind. By his 60s, Josh is trying to make up for lost time, working longer, stressing about money, regretting the decade gap. The emotional trade-off is clear: temporary youth satisfaction versus permanent financial security.
Here's the question only you can answer. Which emotional journey do you want to experience? Sacrifice now and relax later, or relax now and sacrifice later. There's no option where you do neither.
The decade gap isn't just about money, it's about the quality of your entire second half of life. Emma gets to retire early, travel freely, help family, and live without financial fear. That's the real wealth.
Josh gets memories from his 20s, but decades of financial stress in exchange, and memories don't pay for healthcare. The decade you invest in your youth determines the freedom you have in your age.
If you're under 30 right now, you have the most valuable asset in investing: time. But time is the only asset that disappears permanently. Once the decade passes, the advantage is gone forever.
Starting today means you're choosing Emma's path: financial freedom, early retirement, generational wealth. Waiting another year means you're choosing Josh's path: playing catch up forever and working longer.